Being part of the modern society, which strives to establish a peaceful and constructive dialogue across the spheres and countries, we believe that we have a moral right to react at violent video games, which jeopardize all our efforts to create such a society. Therefore, we believe, and this House would ban all violent video games. And saying this, by claiming this, we promote zero tolerance towards violent games in the light of recent events in different countries, such as USA, and in this light of outbursts of violence and criminalizations in various societies across the world. We believe here that violent video games are not the cause of those violences. They're a contributing factor and a tipping point which actually contribute to creation of those violent environments and atmosphere. Here we would like to provide our key definitions. By violent games, we believe that these are games that contain explicit violence, such as murders or abuse. They glorify this violence, and that violence is addressed especially against human beings. And to identify which games are violent, we will use the same system which is used currently by rating organizations and societies in the world. And right here, I'd like to differentiate violent video games from all other sources of violence, such as music with violent lyrics or movies with violence. We believe that video games are different in nature. They are interactive, they absorb you, especially if you play as a first person or a third person and you accomplish missions and you actually project your own personality into the game. This interactive feature of the games, video games, differentiates it from all other sources of violence. Here we also would like to say that we believe, and we can prove in our position, in our case, that violent games pose tangible, short-term harm, as well as potential, so far maybe intangible harm, but we can prove that based on these harms, we have the right to interfere in the situation. In terms of tangible harm, we can say that there are actually many occasions when governments interfere, such as hate speech, as we observe across the countries. At the same time, there can be intangible harm, but we have witnessed certain situations when governments stepped in. For example, we know that different books and different literatures have been banned throughout the history. For instance, Mein Kampf, or we know that Huckleberry Finn was banned in Midwest. So we know that the harm is potential, but at the same time we step in because this potential harm is big enough and the threshold is high enough to actually step in. At the same time, here I'd like to point out all the arguments that we have today. Firstly, we'd like to say that dissemination of violent video games is counterproductive to the educational policy and sabotages it. Secondly, we believe that violent video games trigger negative psychological and physiological reaction. And thirdly, we believe that violence in video games has no use or benefit as such. So let me continue. Why dissemination of violent games? It is counterproductive and counterintuitive to all our efforts of our governments to create a peaceful society, to actually program our society to channel all our efforts into a constructive dialogue. We believe that when system of education tries to actually instill and enforce certain moral imperatives, especially in youth, and if at the same time we disseminate violent games, we are actually sabotaging and jeopardizing the success of these efforts. For example, in the USA we have that there is a constitutional right to bear arms. We cannot do much about it right now, but at the same time we are trying to instill certain moral standards and values about responsible use of guns. If at schools and educational institutions we're trying to instill that, and at the same time, the same youth, the same children who are going through the phase, who are more sensitive to information, who are more likely to internalize everything happening in those games, have access to those games. It means that we are actually we're acting against our own agenda. So at the same time, if this social engineering is jeopardized and This youth have access to such games as Grand Theft Auto, where I can hire a prostitute, or I can do different things just walking on the street and running over pedestrians, killing people and shooting and stealing cars and destroying buildings. It means that the message that government sends, it will be undermined, and the whole idea of violence will be normalized in our society. Secondly, we believe that violent video games trigger certain negative psychological and physiological reaction. In the Ohio University, a year ago, there was a research on the effect of the violent games on people. So they proved that where a certain group of people played violent games only 20 minutes a day during 3 days. They proved 2 things. The first thing, they proved that people tend to get more aggressive, number one, and they project their aggression onto other people. They expect other people to be the same aggressive, so they tend to actually act in the same way. The second point that they proved is that these people have decreased pro-social behavior, meaning that they have less empathy, and then in an event of a violence that they see. So in this case, so we proved that there is a short-term negative effect, and that those violent games, in fact, lead to aggression of those people who play those games. If we have a short-term effect, we already have actually grounds to step in. At the same time, we prove that there is some potential long-term harm to that. So, given all these factors, and given the fact that there is no user benefit in violence in those video games, we believe that we have absolute right to step in. Therefore, we're proud to propose. Awesome.
You feel awesome? But what would happen if a debater, after a debate, feels really, really agitated and angry? How would they outlive it? What would be the safe way to do it?
I would go to the gym and punch a bag.
That would be a safe way to do it, yes. What if you don't have a gym, or what if you don't think like that? What if you're not an athletic person?
Again, everybody has their own hobbies, so I would jog.
Exactly. And some people's hobbies are video games. So should we take that hobby and just forbid it like that?
Some people's hobbies is smoking pot. Should we just skip it?
That would be a different debate, but I would say no. But let's go to another question. Who play video games? In general, who play them?
Youth, youngsters, teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Only youngsters?
Mostly, video games are played by young people.
Mm-hmm. There are video games that are forbidden below the age of 18. Are you aware of that?
Yeah, the rating system, that's right.
Mm-hmm. So we actually have grown-ups playing video games.
Yes, but at the same time, we have young people having access to those games, because censorship is not effective.
Okay. Can a person who plays games make the difference between real life and virtual life?
It depends on the person and his mental and psychological state.
Mm-hmm. Usually the people who can't make the difference, are they the ones who logically think after a situation when they get angry to go to a gym and live it out in a normal way?
When you're a 13-year-old teenager and going through a phase, and you're more sensitive to information, and you're more likely to internalize everything you get, and you play violent video games, your sensitivity towards violence decreases.
Okay. Another question. You talked about making the difference between music and movies and stuff like that. Can a person relate to what is going on in a movie, or in a book, or in newspapers?
Yeah, they can relate.
Or if they see it on the street.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So, you wouldn't do anything about that?
It's not about relating to certain things, it's about doing those things by yourself, or imagining that you're actually acting, that the character in the game is you.
What about martial arts? Thank you.
for years and years, we have fought for the freedom to be happy. We have fought for the freedom not to be prejudiced by people who think because we play violent games, we're going to be violent. What did Shazad tell you? He goes and punches a bag when he's not happy. Well, I think video games are slightly less violent than going and punching a bag. So I don't really see why. I think we should just ban him from actually going into the gym as well, because he seems a bit violent. So I'm going to talk first about how there's these harms in society and how video games are these evil things we need to take out of society. Then I'm going to talk about my two main arguments. The first one will be about zombies and the free market. And the second one will be about the therapeutic value of killing dragons in games. Now, first of all, let's see what they say. They come and say, oh, the problems in the USA with all those shooting is because of games. Well, if you've actually listened, and obviously they're not really part of the modern world, if you actually watched the news, you would see that they actually proved there was no link between these people actually went there and started shooting people and playing video games. And I haven't heard any analysis on that part either. Then they come and say, well, it's a contributing factor and it's very different from movies and books. Why? They have never told us why it's very different from movies and books. I can read a book and be immersed in that book and forget about myself for the past 10 hours. Yes, they admitted that every person is different. So some people will be influenced by books and movies more than they would be influenced by video games, and I don't understand why we're crossing the line right there. Also, they seem not to be part of the modern world. The real game, the only game that they mentioned, is Grand Theft Auto, which appeared a few million years ago, probably. Now, I'm going to talk about real games and about the games and the gaming industry in today's age, which is very different from a decade ago, when probably Shazad was playing games. Now, let's move on the idea of tangible harms. They tell us, well, look, governments have sometimes banned books, so we can do it. They banned Huckleberry Finn in the Middle East. Oh, cool. So because they banned Huckleberry Finn, let's go and ban games, because Huckleberry Finn is this evil book from Satan that makes people go insane. We think that just because governments and some governments have done things like ban books and ban Mein Kampf doesn't mean it's actually a good thing. And doesn't mean we actually should go about and ban these things. And we haven't really heard about the tangible harms of playing video games. We haven't had an analysis of why me playing, except for that research study from the University of Ohio, we haven't heard any real analysis on their part on why video games would actually make me more violent, just because some experts say it. Then they come and say, well, it's counterintuitive because we want to eliminate violence from society. First of all, that doesn't mean we should create an ignorant society. Violence has been part of the world, and violence will probably be part of society, whether we like it or not. Moreover, we still have books, and we still think that, it can have a value to have, games about wars, even though we don't want to have wars there. Because A, they might be fun, and B, because we actually have lessons to teach people there. If people forget what war is about and what violence is about, it's much more easily for them to go back to it, because they don't understand, what violence is about and why we don't like violence and why we don't like smacking people over the head. And lastly, they go about this no user benefit for these things really now. Now let's move on. Let me talk to you about some games. Let's talk about Dishonored, for example. In Dishonored, you are this person that goes about and you can kill people and you have missions. The problem is, the moment that you kill people, you can either kill people or you can put them to sleep. It's more difficult to put them to sleep, but A, you get more points putting them to sleep, and B, the more people you kill, the more difficult the game becomes for you. You are ruining your city and it becomes more difficult for you. That means that these game developers can subtly tell you violence is not okay. Violence will make your life hard. So see, I'm giving you another example. Another example, Mass Effect, okay? Not that they would know what Mass Effect is. But in Mass Effect, you have this huge war with aliens. And what did the game developers do? Is they make you understand the problems of war. You lose companions and you become sad about it. And you understand how horrible wars are. Because you are a user, because you have befriended those characters and now they die. And always in the game, everybody keeps saying how they don't want wars. If we take out the violence, we take out the ability of people to actually help you and mold you. So there are actual benefits. Now about zombies in the free market. We have a lot of industries that all they do is they do for fun. Candies are not healthy for you, and still we let you eat them. Why? Because it's fun and because they're tasty. We let other things who are actually harmful, like smoking and alcohol, who actually creates much more violence than video games, and we let them in society to exist. Why? Because people enjoy it, and because we want people to be happy. Because after 10 hours of dealing with stupid people in the street, you want to go home and bash a zombie, okay? You want to take the baseball bat and bash that zombie until there's no more zombie left. Why? It's fun. We think that is a value. We want people to be happy, and we understand that in today's society, we find new ways to make people being happy. Of course, we didn't have movies at one point, now we have movies. We didn't have video games, now we have video games. They just want to take all the fun from you, all the fun away. Don't trust them. So we have that. Then we have things like mixed martial arts, where you actually go and you punch somebody to a bloody pulp. I want them to tell me why we let these things exist to actually create, and they make you be violent to other people in boxing. Are we letting this exist and taking video games away? I don't know. Okay, let's talk about the therapeutic value of killing dragons really fast. First of all, he admitted that some people have different outlets of anger. Some people jog when they're angry, some people punch back, some people play video games and they kill dragons and they kill all sorts of stuff. And that means, and there's a study from Harvard that shows that 49% of kids actually use this as an outlet for anger. That means that rather than letting them build up those anger there, they can actually steam off and they can use these games to gain control over themselves. And we think this is very important. We think that they've ignored, and all the research in the past 3 years have shown that video games have no connection to actually violence behavior, but never mind. So we can ensure that it has a therapeutic value, and some people do have this outlet of anger, and I don't understand we should take it away from them. Sure, we might have even more people that go about and start bashing people because they just can't bash zombies in real life. So at the end of the day, I think my time is finished and nobody has told me. At the end of the day, it's about your freedom, it's about your happiness. It's not about this prejudice system of violence is bad in every and all games, so don't trust them. They lie.
Hello, Yuan. I like your tie, by the way. First question. Are there better ways of promoting means of coping from stress, like, for example, playing basketball? Or joining a debate tournament, like Idea Youth Forum?
No, the problem is you don't understand that different people have different outlets for anger. Some people react better with games.
Yeah, okay, we're just talking about promoting a better way.
I think this is a better way.
Okay, second way. Really? With that idea? Okay, second way. Second question. Is freedom of choice, or your rights to happiness, absolute?
No, but unless you can prove that I am going to go and bash people.
No, right? For example, you can't say bomb in an airport. There are limitations. Can you consider intangible harms? Are intangible harms enough? Are there intangible harms which are enough to limit your freedom to be, your God-given rights to be happy?
The problem with intangible harms is that they're intangible. You can't really see them, and you just suppose that they're. Maybe if your team actually proved they existed, maybe I can see them.
But what about, for example, banning? But what about eating dogs? It's banned, right? But there's no tangible harm.
In Korea.
Yeah, but in the United States and even in the Philippines, it is banned, right? But there's no tangible harm. So I guess you do limit, even if there are no tangible harms.
But
do you know why Mein Kampf is banned in Germany?
Because a lot of people have problems with books, and they would rather not let people make their own decisions, and the government will just come and say, oh, well, you're all children, we'll tell you what to read and what not.
Yeah, but I think the smarter answer is because that's a policy response to the states to address a dangerous ideology which can trigger racial tension and protect the social fabric. Do you think that in a context where there is a spate of juvenile delinquency, such as the Virginia type, can you say that exposing the kids to violence in general constantly would trigger violent behavior?
Sure, if you expose children to beating every day, you might, but violence in games is very different.
But have you listened to Shirzan? Loving Shirzan, he said that Ohio State University already established the link between violent video games and the level of aggression and anti-social behaviors of these kids.
Unfortunately, I did listen. Now, the problem with that stuff...
Okay, it's too bad you didn't listen. Okay, next question then. Do you know that in the United States, there is a right to bear arms?
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with the idea of people who are antisocial with aggressive behavior carrying these guns because you don't have any means of banning them from actually carrying guns?
I like guns. I think guns shouldn't be banned.
But you're not answering the question. Are you comfortable with the idea of kids who have antisocial, emotional problems, who have problems coping with stress, who think that violence is a means?
Well, I don't think they legally can get their hands on a gun because you have to pass tests, and if we see that you're crazy. And
well, we just had the example of Adam Lanza. For example, the gun is lying around there, and he has access to it, right? But it wasn't his gun. It's widespread. Exactly. But there's still access to it. Do you think that the value of the therapeutic value of feeling fluffy inside is enough a reason for you to is a better reason or a greater reason? Thank you very much.
I don't know many things about video games, but these guys here have taught me a few. And I learned that I learned during the past day that even though games might seem therapeutic and they might seem like harmless fun, we can show that there is both tangible and intangible harm, and therefore we need to step in. What I will do in my speech is I will tackle the rebuttal that Yuan provided, and then we'll go on and answer arguments. Firstly, they say that there is no real link between, shootings in different cities and violence in games. We agree with that. We say it's a really long shot to establish this connection. What we do say that is if we as an affirmative team show that there is a short-term effect, if there is an increase in aggressiveness that spans over 3 days, that's bad enough. Also, we say that if there is some sort of intangible harm, symbolic harm, some sort of wrong message that you send out and you could avoid, that's also reason enough to intervene. Also, they say that books and movies aren't so different because, people are influenced by it and you can read about violence in books and movies. What we say that the main difference is that in one instance, in the video games, you are the aggressor, you are the perpetrator, you are the one actor that is rewarded and encouraged to be violent. Whereas with books and movies, you are this viewer, you are the passive observer, and you are invited to analyze, to understand, to empathize with someone. So actually, while movies invite you to understand why characters act in a certain way, what video games do is push you into being violent and then reward you with little cookies and points. This is a huge difference. Also, they say that we usually ban books because people are not because the state thinks we're not capable enough of assessing them correctly. Yuan says we believe that the reason why we ban certain books is because at some point we decided that the social fabric, that the security of our citizens, that the well-being and me not being offended by being called certain names because of my race or my ethnicity is more important than the entertainment of some other people. And they failed to show why entertainment should trump my security, my well-being, and even my ability not to be offended. Also, they say that some games are educating us about wars, Yuan said. We believe that there is no education about war when you say that war is entertainment and war is fun and shooting other people and going to Afghanistan and going to Iraq. Like I think, let me see, it's Call of Duty that does that. I'm not good at games. That when you go to war and you go to Afghanistan and they give you this setting and you're shooting other people, this is not education. This is telling you that war is fun. This is not giving you a lesson about the horrors of war in some parts of the country. This is just telling you it is okay to do so and it can be entertainment, so please do so. Okay, now going on to their constructive case. Yuan puts a lot of emphasis on why, killing zombies is okay and why games are more intelligent than we believe and how we don't have any education about the cool games that he has been playing. Well, I have a list of games here. Bear with me, I'm not good at games, but what I know is that Need for Speed means that you're trumping the authority of policemen, you're crushing buildings, you're going down the streets, you're riding cars recklessly. What I know about Hitman is that you're this paid assassin where you're rewarded if you kill people when ordered to do so. What I do know about Call of Duty is that they mix fictional ideas of war with actual wars and you're invited to kill other people, to kill your enemies. What I know about simulation games is that you can nicely choose the setting in which you rape people or you kill people and do this setting according to your own will. So what I do know about all these games is that they do invite you to this gratuitous and unnecessary violence. I don't know what games he's playing, but these guys here are playing really rough games. Now, the second argument is about the therapy that it allows you. It allows you to have an outlet for your frustration in case you lose the round, which you will. Therapy. I think that, this is our third constructive argument, you can have this therapeutic value of video games without the violence. They have failed to show us why the violence itself is that special ingredient that allows you to steam off. Because we say that in video games, what actually allows you to cool off is the fact that you can be strategic about it, you can outsmart your opponent, you can plan little things, you can avoid obstacles. All these things you can have in many other games that do not imply killing someone, looking them in the eye, shooting them, and then spitting on their body. You can have the same therapeutic effect without this. Unless they prove to us that this violence is the only thing that will let you sleep better at night, they better come up with better games. So what have we shown you today? Firstly, is that if we manage to show you that there is short-term aggression, and the study has shown, and there are many studies that show that in an interval of 1, 2, or 3 days, you have more acute instincts, your reflexes are arising. It doesn't matter that it's not long-term effect. If in those 3 days you become more snappy, if your reactions are more aggressive, it is reason enough to stop them. But also the intangible harms, the fact that you desensitize people, the fact that you make wars and killing and abusing prostitutes, making seem part of entertainment and making seem normal, I think that is a bad message that we're sending out. So firstly, we show you that there are both tangible and intangible harms that are occurring, and also we are challenging them to show us that why violence is this key ingredient and we cannot live without. If we can live without it, then we should. Thank you.
Okay, you say that books make you more empathic, right?
Yeah.
Does Twilight make you more empathic?
Probably.
Okay, do all games not make you more empathic?
No, I think books, and this actually studies have shown, that books create what we call road of the mind. You are pushed into understanding the character. Why did he do so? Why did he kill that person? Whereas in the game, you don't think much. The game, it is in such a way built that you are meant to kill someone in order to get away.
Okay, you said that, because we have Hitman and stuff, we should ban all games.
And Need for Speed and Call of Duty.
Yeah, should we ban all books because we banned Mein Kampf?
No, obviously. We ban those books that are proven to have some sort of intention.
So why do you have a blanket ban on all violent games instead of seeing which violent games have actual tangible?
Well, as we said in the definition, according to the ratings that usually experts use, we will have this category of violent games that will be banned.
So all violent games...
Probably a character in a game who is singing some sort of rap music on the background is not a tangible harm to society or intangible. But if you're smashing the head of your enemy, I think that's not that subtle.
Okay, let's take the example of dishonor where you're this assassin, right? And you can dishonor, but you're this assassin, you can go and kill people. It's very violent, but it can be very violent. Are we banning it, although it subtly teaches you that violence is really bad?
I don't see the subtle lesson there, and if it's so subtle that I miss it, then we should ban it.
Okay, how about mixed martial arts? What are your stances on that?
Well, I think the point with sports, and some are more aggressive, is that you have control over your own body. You are the actor. You are the victim of your own setting. If you want to play boxing because that lets you steam off, that's okay. But in video games, you
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah, sure.
So you can play boxing if you like it, although it's
Because you have
violent.
control over your body.
Why don't you have control over your game in your game?
Yeah, you have control over your game inside a game. But we say that this game is sending out the message that violence is okay. Is making you aggressive for the next 3 days. Sorry?
In mixed martial arts, where you have to punch a person until they're bloody on the floor, does not send the message that violence is okay.
No, because it is this restrained setting where it's a sport, it has time, and then you're part of it, and then you let go.
So getting paid to nearly kill someone is not sending the message that violence is fine.
I don't think that first of all, I don't think that many people get into that, right? This is probably like a more exotic activity. But secondly, I think that you do have control over your body, which doesn't mean that the state should send out the message by making it available to anyone and encouraging young people to use violence. It's different.
Okay, and how are we just going to ban it because small kids sometimes get these games, although the vast majority of players are actually adults?
It doesn't matter if you're 17 or if you're 33. The fact that you're a paid assassin and you're encouraged to be violent shouldn't change with age. So yeah, I don't care who's playing it. I would ban it anyway.
So it affects adults just as much?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we agree to the proposition of affirmative, then many in this room will not be able to come to a debating forum ever, ladies and gentlemen. Their perceptual bias that violent video games is likely to cause violence in future is sort of synonymous to the pseudo-Nazi perceptional violence that Myanmar had in the 80s, that talking with each other and mentioning the word democracy essentially goes into creating a public riot. Or for that matter, ladies and gentlemen, like in China, ladies and gentlemen, which at this moment of time do not actively, in past did not actively propagate democracy, or did not have a setting of debate, ladies and gentlemen, because they thought they had a perception that because people are talking with each other and exchanging ideas and kids are having fun, they might turn into rioters and they might court treason. That is the exact essential derivation that you have from the propositional case. No argumentative analysis or evidential conclusion as to how, ladies and gentlemen, violent video games can conclusively cause harm. Because that is exactly what they need to prove to win today's debate. So let's just go into the rebuttals before I sort of reiterate on the proposition that we have. The fundamental idea that even if there is not a conclusive evidence, these are contributing factors to violence. To that I say, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of things which are contributing factors to violence. For instance, losing a debate match might be a contributing factor to violence. You might want to kill someone, but you don't, because you're a reasonable person. That is similar, ladies and gentlemen, when my mom said, I need to eat more vegetable, and I was more violent, but I did not kick the shit out of her. Excuse my tongue. That is a simple idea, ladies and gentlemen, that you have to assume that there are multiple factors of there are multiple social factors that at one point of time in your life is likely to sort of influence you to be more violent. But you are not violent, ladies and gentlemen, because you are a reasonable person. You don't essentially go into getting violent at everything or anything and everything that you do not like. The agitational factor is completely subjective, and there is no rational link of a particular factor such as video games into causing violence at the end of the day. The second idea that they say is that on the basis of potential harm, on the basis of the availability of tools that might cause violence, it is advisable to restrict that particular thing. Their analysis is gun control. Australia has free guns. Canada has guns in every kitchen for that matter. But they're not going into killing each other. Just because there is a tool available in a particular country or a tool available to a particular person, such as a video game, does not essentially propagate, provoke, or inflict a violent mentality in that person. It is completely subjective, ladies and gentlemen, and the availability of tool has nothing to do with the cause of a particular violence. So let's just go into sort of reiterating what we are talking about. We say that video games are fun. And this, ladies and gentlemen, fun is a fundamental right. We think it is okay for children to have the opportunity to go to hate their teacher, hate the curriculum, and hate the girl that is not accepting your proposal, and go back home and try to release that frustration one way or other, just to have fun with video games. Some of that, and that is not my personal experience, some people might think violent video games are that way. We think, ladies and gentlemen, as long as, well, that person is not killing that teacher and killing his girlfriend, it is fine to allow that person to play video games. And there isn't a logical analysis on their part that has proven that that person is more likely to cause violence for the agitational factors. And we say, ladies and gentlemen, as long as you're allowing these people to have more fun, allowing these people to be more happy, allowing these people to learn all the positive things out of video games, such as strategies, such as motion control, such as to use your head in general, you are good. Those people will be fine. The second idea, what we discussed, is video games are essential outlets of violence. And this is reality. The countries that has the access to technology and video games of violent nature are far more peaceful in comparison with countries that do not even have computers for that matter, ladies and gentlemen. We say very simply, well, I mean, the Texas massacre or the Virginia thing, that happens in Bangladesh, well, I mean, every 3 months. That happens in Pakistan every day. Rahul can vouch on that. And we say, ladies and gentlemen, the idea is quite simple, that there is no link between the video games causing harm. As long as you can have fun and release your frustration, video games are fantastic.
So, you were claiming that video games make you happy.
Yes.
Alright. So, they make you happy through rewards. So when you kill someone, you get points and you outsmart your enemies. Is that right?
Well, it might be that, or it might be I just want to play video games, regardless whether I'm a good player or a bad player.
Okay. If I kill people and I get points, and the more people I kill, I get more points, what sort of message does it send?
Well, the idea is very simple. Unlike reality, where when you kill a person, you destroy a family, when you're playing a video game, you're not destroying anything in it, you're not causing harm. So there is no bad message at the end of the day.
Do you think teenagers under 15 can necessarily differentiate between virtual reality and actual reality, and can they internalize what's happening in their virtual world?
Okay, so age of was of canon, and all the violent video games are 18 plus, and most of the violent video game players are adult players. That is A. B. Even if, well, let's suppose that some minors get access to this video game, that doesn't essentially mean that they're irrational enough not to be able to make a proper judgment.
You know, if I'm 14 and I have this great friend of mine, Rahil from Pakistan, he's 18. I can ask him to buy me a CD with a game plus 18. He can bring that to me. Censorship doesn't work here. Do you agree with that?
The underlying message is, even if you procure that CD one way or other, it doesn't. It makes you a bad person. It might make you a
Thank you
Eat
very
for
much.
that,
Thank you
but
very
not
much.
a killer.
You mentioned mixed martial arts. When
I know that.
you do sports, your side, when you do sports, do you spend energy?
I
Do you
do.
actually steam off?
Yes.
And what happens when you actually play video games? Do you spend any sort of physical energy?
It depends on what game. If you are playing Wii,
Do you agree that when increased dopamine, the hormone of happiness happens during virtual games?
yes.
So it actually makes you more excited rather than steamed off, cooled off.
Well, and it also happens when you're extremely frustrated, when you're extremely angry, or you're extremely tired. So the dopamine effect can happen in multiple other
Alright,
causes. It's more
okay.
exclusive than this one.
Another question is, you said there is no actually harm, tangible harm, but the research shows that the aggression increases over 3 days when people play only 20 minutes a day, and they lack empathy. Do you think lack of empathy and desensitizing violence is enough to actually step in?
A, we do not think any research conclusively shows that empathy is reduced because of video games. And B, we think empathy or any other human behavior, even if those are decreased in cases, can be decreased by many other things that you
The
are
last
not
question.
planning at this moment of time.
Okay, thank you.
Boy oh boy, I'll be in the ideal website. Thank God I wore my clothes. My fur, whatever you call it. Okay, so my main reservation with the entire opposition bench is that they're largely nitpicking. The first thing that they said is that, well, what about mixed martial arts, for example? Well, we say that there is a need in mixed martial arts. It is clear that it's happening in the real world. But where there are acceptable rules which are being followed. In violent video games, for example, it tends to mix virtual reality and actual reality. And the problem with virtual reality is that you can't come up with all these weird rules and socially unacceptable rules, for example. Like in Grand Theft Auto, you can't kill policemen or even the homeless people, ladies and gentlemen. So you're creating that kind of worldview in the minds and hearts of these kids. The second thing which they said is that, well, what about adult players? They're the only ones who are already playing these games anyway, so there wouldn't be any impact on the kids. Well, we say that it's untrue because you do not jail kids who play. You just prevent them from buying these things, and you can't always, beg your parents, for example, to buy these violent video games. This is just as much as the parent and as the kids in the United States actually beg their parents to buy them, tons of Mac Savers or McDonald's product, ladies and gentlemen. Or probably if your dad is actually, playing this game, or an adult is playing this game and it's lying around, you can always access these kinds of violent video games. So we say that the impact of the kids, who are actually the ones who were largely addicted by this, and statistics were able to prove that, ladies and gentlemen, there is a great impact. So let me move on then to the main issues in today's debate. This debate doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in a context wherein there's a spate of juvenile delinquency, just like in the Virginia Tech that we've talked to you about in Adam Lanza. It happens in a state wherein where bearing of arms is declared to be a constitutional right and cannot be banned by the United States. Wherein the only measure that's available for the states to use is to strengthen the regime of responsible use of guns through educational programs. We think, ladies and gentlemen, that given all of these entire contexts, the development of video games is the tipping point for them to actually commit all of these violence in society. But let's take a look at a more overarching issue in today's debate. This debate is largely about whether or not it's justified for the states to ban. I have three major issues. The first one is sabotaging legitimate social program of the state enough a reason for us to ban? And the second one is, are the harms brought upon by violent video games enough a reason for us to ban? And lastly, let's try to strike a balance between their individual rights as well as the harms which we talked to you about in today's debate. First one is sabotaging legitimate social programs enough reason for you to ban? We talked about Huckleberry Finn, for example, when you wanted to protect a social value of social integration and easing up racial tension in that part of the world. Well, in the Philippines, we don't think the same nigger, for example, is such a bad thing. But in that part of the world, it actually holds so much harms, ladies and gentlemen, and it actually opens wounds and probably creates this idea that that blacks are slaves, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the reason why it's acceptable for them. We're not saying that we're supposed to ban it just because it is being done in the United States or in the Western area, but we say that it is a well-settled rule and jurisprudence that we can't possibly do it. And in the context that we have right now, we have this policy where there is juvenile delinquency going on, and we think that's the way in which we address that is for us to make sure that people are responsible in holding these guns, ladies and gentlemen. The state's only option is to educate on the harm of gun use and to strengthen their inhibition against their impulse from using handguns outside of self-defense. So what we're doing with video games is that it's counterproductive to this, because you're saying that you can use guns casually, or you're creating that association of pleasure and using guns, ladies and gentlemen, in accordance with Pavlov's stimulus response theory, something which we've generally mentioned a while ago in the first speaker's speech. The next question is, are the harms brought upon by the violent games enough reason for us to actually ban it? We've told you the dual nature of violent video games. The first one is that it's interactive, and the second one is highly addictive. We've told you, as what Answer John talked about, is that Ohio State University talked about the idea of a mean world syndrome, wherein there is an expectation that everybody is generally aggressive, ladies and gentlemen. But secondly, we also created this idea came up with this idea that it's interactive, and that's one thing which First Negative fails to recognize, because some people can't distinguish between virtual reality as well as real world, especially if you are a minor who can't even distinguish between what is right from wrong, ladies and gentlemen. And we say that that kind of perception happens over a long period of time, wherein it seeps into your subconscious just as much as, for example, thinking that a toy gun, or sorry, a toy truck is something which only a man can actually use, and not a woman, ladies and gentlemen. That's generally how the process actually works. But even if, for example, the last idea which I wanted to show is that let's try a balance between the individual liberty and state liberty, ladies and gentlemen, and the rights to protect them. They've never told us essentially why it's important for us to protect state individual liberty. But we said that we are trying to balance it, largely because we're not banning violent music and all these violent things, but we say that where there is a clear link or a clear contribution, that's where the state has to step in and say that we have to do something about the problem and actually ban violent music.
Hello everyone. So, first thing I want to say is that this debate is not only about kids, as the affirmative has been trying to do. This debate is about people like Ion, who play violent video games, the entire judges' meeting, for example. And this debate is about people who actually use violent video games on a daily basis as an outlet. But okay, let's go to my first argument, which are benefits of modern video games. Emphasize on the word modern. We're not talking about games like Grand Theft Auto or whatever were mentioned here already. We're not banning them if we're talking about this. We have new generation of video games. This is a very, very developing business, just like every other technological area. The video games develop daily basis, and the new sort of generation of video games was already mentioned and introduced by Ion. And you can see how these games do not actually want you to be a murderer, do not actually want you to be a killer, but they want you to do this strategic planning and this social interaction and stuff like that, which is actually benefiting and developing for both grown-ups and youngsters. And also, if we talk about games like where you go to Afghanistan and play a sniper or whatever, this is for me, who I've been growing up in a pink bubble in this gorgeous country called Estonia. I don't know nothing about wars. I've never seen one, I've never experienced one. So playing this kind of a video game, for me, allows to see what a horrific and gruesome thing a war can be. And I don't think that banning this is a right thing to do. And second of all, me playing this game can also be an outlet, because I will be frustrated on so many things. I personally am not so good with video games. I don't like them at all. But I do, for example, boxing. I do things that are actually violent, which is so much worse. And me doing violence and bashing other girls sends a signal that violence is okay. I don't think that we should agree with Bianca, who said that MMA doesn't spread violence. It does. people looking at girls bashing each other or men bashing each other to the ground, as one pointed out very recently, sends out the signal that violence is okay and we should do it. So things like that are so much worse, and violent video games is one of the safest ways to actually live yourself out after you have had this very agitating situation or you become very, very angry. Because there is the fact that violence is in us. No matter how or which way we come to contact it, people get angry, we have emotions, and we get agitated, and we become violent in certain situations. If I read a book which makes me sad, I will cry. Because it makes me want to, it affects me. No matter what, if I play the game myself, or if I read a book, it affects me. Personally, in a sad way, or in an outlet way, it affects me. And if we talk about that, video games are interactive, and books and stuff like that that we come to contact every daily basis are not. In that case, I would talk about hobbies like hunting and going to a shooting range, or jobs like butchers and stuff like that. They are violent on a daily basis. I mean, I as a vegetarian agree that butchering and any kind of animal slaughtering should be banned. Another thing that the affirmative talked about is government banning and the signal that it should send. One thing that we need to remember is that in order to ban something, we need a wide social agitation, the reason to ban something. At the moment, there is no wide social agitation or this great reason to ban violent video games. On the other hand, banning this actually can cause wide social agitation and people not being okay with this situation and might even go outside and bash stuff because they don't have this outlet anymore. So pretty much, I've talked about the benefits of video games in general. I've talked about the benefits of violent video games, how they can be educational, how they can be strategic planning and stuff like that, and how violence is something that is around us in every situation or everywhere, and this only gives us a good and healthful situation where we can outlet this. So I hope we've proven this case and that you believe that banning video games, whichever are violent or not, should never be done.